Millions of people in the United States were listening to a popular radio program that featured theatrical plays. The performance that evening was an adaptation of the science fiction novel The War of the Worlds. Actors portraying news announcers described the landing of an invasion force from Mars that would cause widespread destruction on Earth. Although it had been announced that the radio program was a play, many listeners thought that the attack was real and became frightened. Some even took certain measures in an attempt to protect themselves from imaginary aliens. Today there is a real war looming on the horizon. However, people are failing to respond to its approach. This war is foretold not in a science fiction novel, but in God's inspired word, the Bible. It is the war of Armageddon, God's war against this wicked system of things. In this war, God's servants on earth will not need to defend themselves against aliens from another planet. Still, they will be awestruck by astonishing events and by the fear-inspiring display of God's power.
Question on the first two paragraphs is a two-part question, so we'll get the first part. What real war looms on the horizon? Sister Allen, please. Ebony.
It is the war of Armageddon, God's war against this wicked system of things.
Very good. And the second part, what will God's servants not need to do in this war? Sister Bland, please, in the third row.
In this war, God's servants on earth will not need to defend themselves against the aliens from another planet.
Okay, thank you. Or Sister Amy, please.
So being that this war is Jehovah's war against the nation, they have an opportunity, these ones that are servants of Jehovah, to be able to stand back. As it mentions, they'll be awestruck by the fear-inspiring display of Jehovah's power.
Yes. Thank you. Let's go on to paragraph 3 then.
A Bible prophecy recorded in Zechariah chapter 14 has a direct bearing on the War of Armageddon. Though recorded some 2,500 years ago, this prophecy touches our very lives. Much of what is stated there relates both to situations affecting God's people since the Messianic kingdom was established in heaven in 1914, and to exciting events that will unfold in the very near future. The salient features of the prophecy include the formation of a very great valley and the going forth of living waters. This valley plays a vital role in providing protection for Jehovah's worshipers. And when we understand what the living waters can mean for us, not only will we see the need to partake of them, but we will also want to drink them. It is to our benefit, then, to pay close attention to this prophecy.
What prophecy will we consider, and why is it of interest to us? Again, a two-part question. What prophecy? Sister Mildred Deach, please.
That's the prophecy that is in Zechariah chapter 14.
Okay, thank you. So why don't we open up our Bibles right there? And we're going to read verses 4 and then verse 8. Sister Angie Williams, if you'd read that as we all turn to it. Zechariah chapter 14, verses 4 and 8. Because there's two things that are mentioned here that are commented on in the paragraph. Please, Sister Williams.
And to see who actually stand in that day upon the mountain of olive trees, which is in front of Jerusalem. And it must occur in that day that the living waters will go forth from Jerusalem, half of them to the eastern sea, and half of them to the western sea. And in winter it will occur.
Okay, I think you missed part of verse 4 there.
front of Jerusalem on the east, and the mountain on the olive trees must be split at its middle from the sun rising and to the west. There will be a very great valley, and half of the mountain will actually be moved to the north and half of it to the south.
Okay, thank you. Okay, very good. Thank you for that. Now, the second part of that question, why is that prophecy of interest to us? 2,500 years ago. Sister Velma Allen, please.
There in Romans 15:4, it tells us, "For all things were written aforetime for our instruction, that through our endurance and through the comfort from the Scriptures that we might have hope." So all this information and these prophecies, they will affect our daily life today.
Okay, thank you. Sister Linda Tuss, please, in the back.
It also points out that there are features of this prophecy that included a very great valley and living waters, and this valley plays a vital role in providing protection for Jehovah's worshipers. So that's why it's very important for us to know what it means.
Hey, thank you. Brother Tuss, please.
I also appreciated the scripture they used in 2 Peter 1:19 and 20. But there in 21 basically tells us that these prophecies were not designed by men. They were given to men by God. And that being the case, we can put our total confidence that the lesson we're about to learn not only affects us now, but in the very near future.
Hey, thank you. Sister Politich, please.
And in line with what Brother Tuss said in 2 Peter there, it says that we want to be paying attention to this prophetic word. So even though this lesson maybe is a bit harder to understand at first glance than some other lessons we've had, because this prophecy affects us since the beginning of the Messianic kingdom and soon when that kingdom brings its rulership fully over the earth, we really benefit when we pay close attention to what this has to say for us.
Okay, thank you. Now, it uses a word there in the regular edition of the Study Watchtower. It says salient or salient. That means prominent or striking features. What were those two prominent or striking features, or two of them, that are in that prophecy again? Sister DeBell, please.
Two of the features are a very great valley and these living waters that would come forth.
Okay, and as we go through our lesson, we're going to consider those as subheadings. We go on now to paragraph 4. But first, in the subheading, A Day Belonging to Jehovah begins, we're going to turn to Zechariah chapter 14 and read verses 1 and 2 before the reading of the paragraph. Zechariah chapter 14, verses 1 and 2. Okay, we're going to have Sister Soto read that for us as we follow along in our own copies of the Bible.
Look, there's a day coming belonging to Jehovah, and the spoil of you will certainly be a portion out in the midst of you, and I shall certainly gather all the nations against Jerusalem for the year, and the city will actually be captured, and the houses be pillaged, and the women themselves will be raped, and half of the city must go forth into the exile. But as for the remaining ones of the people, they will not be cut off from the city.
Against Jerusalem for the war. Thank you. Now we can have the reading of paragraph 4.
The 14th chapter of Zechariah opens with a reference to a day belonging to Jehovah. What is this day? It is the Lord's Day, which began when the kingdom of the world became the kingdom of our Lord and of his Christ. That day started in 1914 with the birth of the Messianic kingdom in the heavens. Decades before 1914, Jehovah's worshipers declared to the nation that the end of the appointed times of the nations would come in that year, and that the world would enter into an unequaled period of trouble. How did the nations respond? Instead of paying heed to that timely warning, political and religious leaders scorned and persecuted those zealous anointed evangelizers. In doing so, these world leaders mocked Almighty God himself, for anointed kingdom ambassadors represent heavenly Jerusalem, the
Terry, please.
It is the Lord's Day, which began when the kingdom of the world became the kingdom of our Lord and of his Christ. That day started in 1914 with the birth of the Messianic kingdom of the heavens.
Thank you. Zachary, I saw your hand after I called on her. Could I get your thought, please, Zachary?
That day started in 1914.
Very good. Thank you, Zachary. Appreciate your being willing to fill us in on that. Thank you. The B portion, we're going to go to Brother Kelton on the telephone tie-in. Decades before 1914, what were Jehovah's Worshipers declaring, and how did world leaders respond?
Jehovah's people were declaring the end of the Gentile times that would occur in 1914, and the political leaders and the religious leaders and so on, they mocked them. They mocked these people and said that they were wrong or they don't know what they're talking about.
Thank you. Brother Tim Rainer, please.
And really their response to mocking them and not paying heed to this was really mocking Jehovah God himself, because these ones that delivered the message were really ambassadors that represented.
Hey, thank you. Now, they were declaring this decades before 1914. How'd they pick that date out of a hat? Well, sounds good to me. Luke 21, flag towards that. Brother Christensen, please. Down front.
They knew from Bible prophecies that the Gentile times would end in 1914, and so that's just one example.
Yes, the timetables, scriptures. Sister Rainer, please, Jerry.
And they knew that, according to Luke 21:24, that Jerusalem would be trampled on until the appointed times of the nations would be fulfilled. And that Jerusalem was not literal Jerusalem, which is pointed out at Hebrews 12, verse 22 and 28. It would be they would approach Mount Zion, the city of the living God, which would be heavenly Jerusalem.
Thank you, very good. In that time period, does anybody recall how long that time period, the appointed times of the nations, was going to be that Jerusalem would be trampled on? Brother Bonanno, please.
From 607 to 1914, 2,520 years.
Yes.
And it's interesting to note that there's a certain other groups, religious groups, were kind of trying to figure out when that day would come, and there was a lot of different variations to exactly when that time came, but of course Jehovah God made sure that the right individuals knew, and it came to 1914.
Yes, and that was the beginning, as we're discussing according to the subheading. What? Mr. Mildred Deitch.
That was the beginning of the Lord's Day.
Or the day belonging to Jehovah. Paragraph 5 and 6, please.
Zechariah foretold what action the nations would take, saying, "The city, Jerusalem, will actually be captured." The city is symbolic of God's messianic kingdom. It is represented on earth by its citizens, the remnant of anointed Christians. During World War I, prominent members within the earthly part of Jehovah's organization were captured or arrested and sent off to a prison in Atlanta, Georgia, USA. Their houses were pillaged in that injustices and brutality were heaped upon these and other innocent integrity keepers. The attackers plundered the wealth of influence that the remnant exercised by banning their literature and restricting their activities as kingdom proclaimers. Although God's people were outnumbered, misrepresented, opposed, and persecuted at the hands of the attackers, true worship could not be crushed out of existence. There were the remaining ones of the people, that is, the anointed remnant, who loyally refused to be cut off from the city.
The A portion, what foretold action did the nations take against the city and its citizens? Brother Terry, please.
That city itself which is Jerusalem, it was was going to be captured, and so also the city is a symbol of God's messianic kingdom, and it was represented on the earth by its citizens. And it said during World War I, private members within the earthly part of Jehovah's organization that was captured, and they were arrested and sent off to prison in Atlanta, Georgia.
Okay, thank you. So, when we're saying Jerusalem, there are 4 Jerusalems mentioned in the scriptures. Which Jerusalem are we referring to? The city over in Israel? No. It's figurative. So there's 3 figurative ones in the scriptures. There's the Jerusalem above, and she is our mother. That's God's wife-like organization of loyal spirit creatures. Not that one. You can't capture that one. There's the New Jerusalem. That refers to the 144,000, Christ's bride. And then there's the heavenly Jerusalem. This is a higher number, one more than 144,000. That's the Messianic kingdom arrangement. 144,001. Which Jerusalem are we talking about? Eliminated 3 already. There's only 1 left. Sister Rayner?
This is the Messianic kingdom, which would be the 144,001.
Yes, the heavenly Jerusalem. That was captured. When it said the citizens, what citizens were captured symbolically? Brother Rayner, please.
They were the prominent members of that city, of the 144,000. Really, you might call it today, would be like the governing body being captured. They were taken off and arrested, put in Atlanta, Georgia, USA, for a long time. And even their houses were pillaged, and different types of injustices were piled upon them falsely.
And so it gives application of this figurative fulfillment of this prophecy in Zechariah 14. The city was figurative. The citizens are figurative of the anointed remnant. And then certain representatives were sent off to prison on false charges. The pillagers take your property. What property did it take? Brother Christensen, please.
Paragraph puts it simply, plundering their wealth of influence.
Okay, thank you. Brother Amy, please.
So that would be the literature and the things that they needed to use and their activity in itself, spiritual activity.
Okay, thank you. Now, in those verses in Zechariah, it mentions the portion, who were the remaining ones of the people. Sister Gentry, please.
They're the anointed remnant who loyally refused to be cut off from the city.
Yes, right. Had to do with an issue of loyalty that was there. Paragraph 7, please.
Was this prophecy completely fulfilled by the end of World War I? No. More attacks by the nations were to come against the anointed remnant and their loyal companions within earthly hope. World War II is proof of that. The integrity-keeping course of God's faithful anointed witnesses spurs on God's servants today to endure whatever trials come their way, including opposition from unbelieving relatives, workmates, or schoolmates who ridicule them for their faith. No matter where they live, True worshipers are more determined than ever to stand firm in one spirit, not being frightened by their opponents. Where, though, will Jehovah's people find safety in a world that hates them?
For the question answer, we have Sister Kelton on the telephone tie. In the course of Jehovah's anointed witnesses sets what example for all true worshipers today?
Well, in Revelation 12, verse 17, Satan was going to wage war against these anointed ones, and because of their faithfulness, especially during World War II, when we read about them in the yearbooks and in the magazines, that spurs us on to endure whatever trials come our way, whether it's opposition from unbelieving relatives, workmates, or schoolmates, or any other circumstance we may have. Their example spurs us on to remain our integrity to Jehovah.
In John chapter 15, verses 17 through 19, Jesus said what concerning his followers? The Paula teach, please.
Talked about his command to them that they love one another, but he also warned them that because they were no part of the world and he had chosen them out of the world, on that account the world would hate them.
Thank you. Yet, despite that, what counsel was given in Philippians chapter 1, verses 27 and 28? Brother Tim Reno.
Yeah, they were told to stand firm, to behave in a manner worthy of the good news, to not in any way be ashamed of it, and in no respect to be frightened by their opponents.
Yes, of which there are many. Thank you. Now we go to our subheading, Jehovah forms a very great valley. And we're going to turn to our Bibles again to Zechariah, and I'm sorry for doing this to Brother Hayworth here, having him stand up and sit down. Zechariah chapter 14, verses 3 through 5. Zechariah 14, 3 through 5. Sister Terry, would you read that for us, please? As we follow along, verses 3 through 5. Got a whole paragraph there.
And Jehovah will certainly go forth to war against those nations, as in the day of his warring and the day of fight. And his feet will actually stand in that day upon the mountain of the olive trees, which is in front of Jerusalem on the east, and the mountain of olive trees must be split at its middle, from the sun rising and to the west. There will be a very great valley, and half of the mountain will actually be moved to the north, and half of it to the south. And you people will certainly flee to the valley of my mountains, because the valley of my mountains will reach all the way to Azel. And you will have to flee just as you fled because of the earthquake in the days of Uzziah, the king of Judah. And Jehovah my God will certainly come, all the holy ones being with him.
Thank you, Erica. Now we can have the reading of paragraph 8.
Since Jerusalem, the city, is symbolic of heavenly Jerusalem, the mountain of the olive trees, which is in front of Jerusalem, must also be taken symbolically. What does that mountain represent? How will it be split at its middle and become two mountains? Why does Jehovah refer to them as my mountain? In the Bible, mountains can represent kingdoms or governments. Also, blessings and protection are associated with God's mountain. Thus, the mountain of the olive trees on which God stands to the east of earthly Jerusalem represents Jehovah's universal sovereignty, his supreme rulership.
The A portion. What can mountains symbolize in the Bible? Brother Allen, please, in the back wing.
Brings our attention that mountains can represent kingdoms or governments, and it also adds that blessings and protections are associated with God's mountain.
Yes, as a matter of fact, in Isaiah chapter 25, verses 6 and 7, what did it say with regard to the realm of God's mountain there, God's holy mountain?
It was a very big wonder, all right? But let's analyze
Other Christians.
The reason why is there's so much competition out there right now. Not just other cable news networks.
You could make a banquet of well-oiled dishes for all the people in that.
Yes, that's right. It's always going to bring blessings and protection to them. Okay, the B portion, we have Brother Kelvin on telephone tie-in. What does the mountain of the olive trees represent?
Jehovah's universal sovereignty.
Good. Thank you, Bill. Appreciate it. It's nice to have brothers and sisters on telephone tie-in so they can share in the meeting as well. Get the spiritual. Appreciate that wonderful provision. So, some questions are raised there in the first part of the paragraph, just before the read scripture is mentioned. What does the mountain represent? Found out. How will it be split at its middle and become two mountains? Well, we're going to find out. And why does Jehovah refer to them as my mountains? So we're going to look for the answers as we go on. Paragraph 9.
What is indicated by the division of the mountain of the olive trees? The mountain, which is to the east of Jerusalem, splits in the sense that Jehovah establishes another rulership, a subsidiary one. This secondary rulership is the Messianic kingdom in the hands of Jesus Christ. That is why Jehovah speaks of the two mountains that result from the splitting of the Mount of Olives as being my mountains. Both of them are his.
In what sense does the Mount of Olives split? Are we going to look over towards Jerusalem to see the Mount of Olives, which still exists, and see two pieces? What do you think? Sister Hughes, please.
No, that's not it at all. But Jehovah has the rulership of one, and he has established the other one. So in that respect, it's still his, but it's the Messianic kingdom that's under Jesus Christ, which is us.
Very good. Thank you. That's it. Remember, it's symbolic. And if you look at Zechariah chapter 14 in verse 5 there, we can see where that term is used, how Jehovah refers to these two mountains. I'd like to read the first 3 lines there of verse 5. Sister Gentry, please.
And you people will certainly flee to the valley of my mountains.
Yes, that's it. That's it. See, Jehovah refers to those mountains as what? Brother Deitch, please.
He calls them my mountains, showing that it belongs to him, and that he sets them up.
Yes. So again, one mountain on one side, one mountain on the other. What are those mountains again? Not just Jehovah's mountains, but what are they? How can we identify them? Emphasize it. Brother Bonanno?
Again, this is still one arrangement by Jehovah God, but he's using his Messianic kingdom as well in its role. But overall, he's controlling everything. It's still his sovereignty. It's just part of his arrangement right now.
It's a subsidiary kingdom. It's still his, because he authors it. Okay, we've got that clear in mind. Let's go on to paragraph 10 then, for another point.
When the symbolic mountain splits, half to the north and half to the south, Jehovah's feet remain set upon both mountains. A very great valley comes into existence beneath Jehovah's feet. This symbolic valley represents divine protection, by which Jehovah's servants find safety under his universal sovereignty and his Son's Messianic kingdom. Jehovah will make sure that pure worship will never be snuffed out. When did this division of the mountain of the olive trees take place? It occurred when the Messianic kingdom was established at the end of the Gentile times in 1914. When did the flight of true worshipers to the symbolic valley begin?
We'll find find out the answer to that question in a little bit. But the question, what does the very great valley between the two mountains represent? Brother Hill, please.
Well, it's a symbolic representation of Jehovah's protection and making sure that under Jehovah, that pure worship will never be snuffed out.
Very good, thank you. Sister Williams, Angie, did I get your thought? What about yours, sister? Was your hand up, Sister Gentry? I got your thought too. Very good. So what we need to find out is, you have two mountain ranges, usually there's a valley in between. When did that great valley come into existence? Sister Mildred-Deach.
Came into existence when the Messianic Kingdom was established, and that was back in 1914.
Very good, thank you. Think of that in your mind's eye. Picture that, a very great mountain, and it gets split in two, because when there's a very great mountain, is there a valley in between? No, you have a very great mountain, right? But if you split that, separate it, what's in between? What's in between? Brother Terry? A valley, yes. Okay, and since this is Jehovah's universal sovereignty here, and then he breaks it in two, splits it in two, and this Messianic kingdom here, and universal sovereignty here, the valley only occurs when what is formed? Brother Tufts?
I think I missed your question, but I'm thinking, that valley acts as a protection beneath the two mountains.
Okay,
I think I missed your question,
but
though.
when? That's what it does, what it is. But universal sovereignty, Jehovah splits it, Messianic kingdom one side, universal sovereignty is still there. When did that valley begin? Brother Rayner? With the setting up of the Messianic kingdom. Before that, the valley wasn't there, was it? Messianic kingdom was formed, now you've got the valley. So it began in 1914, which is when the Messianic kingdom was set up. Okay. But then we had that question at the end. When did the flight of true worshipers to that symbolic valley begin? Let's find out as we go to the flight to the valley begins, paragraphs 11 and 12.
Jesus warned his followers, "You will be objects of hatred by all the nations on account of my name." During the last days of this system of things, since 1914, that hatred had become especially intense. In spite of the vicious attack launched against the anointed remnant by their enemies during World War I, those of this faithful group were not killed off. In 1919, they were liberated from the clutches of Babylon the Great, the world empire of false religion. That is when the flight to the Valley of Jehovah's Mountains began. Since 1919, the Valley of Divine Protection continues to protect true worshipers earthwide. Over the decades, in many parts of the world, there have been bans and restrictions on the field ministry and the Bible literature of Jehovah's Witnesses. Such restrictions still exist in certain lands. Try as the nations may, however, they will never succeed in stamping out true worship. Jehovah's powerful arm will prove to be with his people.
The A portion. When did the flight to the symbolic valley begin? Sister Gentry, please.
It was in 1919 when they were liberated from the clutches of Babylon the Great, the world empire of false religion.
Very good, thank you. And it referenced to the Revelation book there, and those verses in Revelation 11 and 12. What was referenced in those verses? Something very symbolic there. Sister Rayner, please. Jerry.
Well, this was a reference to the fact fact that they would be put in jail, and then after 3.5 days, the spirit would enter back into them, and then Jehovah made it so they could be released. So now, no longer did false religion have any control over them.
Before that, they were, in a sense, held in captivity, weren't they? But if the door is open, you break the doors open, what do prisoners do when the prison door is open, usually? Sister Mildred Deach.
They escape.
They escape. They run, don't they? So Jehovah's people now were running to where? Sister Paula Deach.
This valley of protection in between the two symbolic mountains of Jehovah.
Yes, which came into existence when? Sister Erica Terry? In 1914, with the establishment of the Messianic Kingdom. And so then in 1919, when those doors were broken loose from Babylon the Great, that's when they started going into it. So then we go to the B question, which Sister Kelton has an answer for us. What proves that Jehovah's strong arm is with his people?
That in spite of the bans and restrictions on the field ministry and Bible literature in many lands, they have not been able to stamp out true worship anywhere in the earth, and they are not going to succeed because Jehovah's powerful arm is always with his people.
Paragraph 13, please.
If we stick to Jehovah and stand firm in the truth, he and his Son, Jesus Christ, will do their part, and God will not allow anyone or anything to snatch us out of his hand. Jehovah is ready to extend whatever help is needed so that we may obey him as the universal sovereign and remain loyal subjects of the Messianic kingdom. It is imperative that we remain in the valley of protection, for that valley will take on even greater meaning for true worshipers during the fast approaching Great Tribulation.
We have a two-part question. How do we stay, let me read that again. How do we stay in Jehovah's protective valley, and why is it now more important than ever to do so? Let's address the first part of the question. How do we stay? Brother Terry, please. Oh, wait a second. I'm sorry. I just saw a hand. Shantae, please. Sister Parker.
To stay in Jehovah's protective valley, we must stick to Jehovah God and stand firm in the truth.
Thank you. Thank you, Shantae. Brother Terry, did that get your thought completely? Okay. Thank you. Okay, that's the first part of the question. How do we stay? And why is it now more important than ever to do so? Sister Williams, please. Angie.
Like Brother Don Christensen brought out about holding on to a life raft with the jacket, or holding it on with your hands. Sometimes the trials we go through in our lives, we may be just holding on with 4 by our fingers, but we have to hold on tight because we are closer to the Great Tribulation than before.
Thank you. Sister Ward, please. Debbie.
So Jehovah is ready to help us, but we have to do our part by obeying him and sticking to him. And no matter what, no one can snatch us from Jehovah's hand.
Yes. Very good. So we think about this. That valley symbolizes what again, basically? How would you define that valley? Brother Amy?
Jehovah's protective care.
Yes. Do you think we're going to need it more in the future than we have up till now? What do you think? I see some heads going the right way. Sister Jerry Rayner?
Absolutely, and because we're facing a great tribulation which has never occurred before. That's greater than the flood. That's greater than the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. So we want to really put our complete trust and faith in Jehovah's provisions.
And stay in that valley. This point's going to come up again. The day of warring arrives is our next subheading, paragraphs 14 and 15.
As the end of this system of things draws closer, Satan will intensify his attacks upon Jehovah's servants. Then will come the day of God's warring against his enemies. Jehovah will make sure that one of Satan's attacks will prove to be his last. On that day, the sovereign of the universe will distinguish himself as a warrior more gloriously than he has during any previous day of fight. On the day of God's warring, what will be the situation of those outside the great valley of protection? They will have no precious light of divine favor shining upon them. In that coming day of fight, the horse, the mule, the camel, and the male ass, and every sort of domestic animal, symbols of the nation's military equipment, will be affected. Such equipment will be congealed, put out of operation as if stiffened by cold. Jehovah will also use pestilence and the scourge. Whether literal or not, the scourge will silence terrifying threats. On that day, one's very eyes and tongue will rot away, in that the attackers will be able to strike out only blindly, and their defiant speech will be silenced. No section of the earth will escape destruction. The forces lined up on Satan's side in the battle will be tremendous. Those slain by Jehovah will certainly come to be in that day from one end of the earth clear to the other end.
Thank you. We're going to get a chance to look at more scriptures in Zechariah chapter 14. On the day of God's warring against his enemies, what will be the situation of those outside the valley? That is Jehovah's protective care. So as we turn to Zechariah chapter 14, we're going to look at verse 6. Who would like to read verse 6 for us, please? How about Sister or Brother Terry, please, Hubert, if you'd read that for us as we follow along. Just verse 6.
Verse 6, and it must occur in that day that there will prove to be no precious light. Things will be congealed.
Okay, thank you. What's the meaning of that scripture? Sister Bond, please. Darlene.
It just means that the very things that the nations put all their trust in is their military might and their bombs, weapons, political ideologies, I guess you would say, or thinking their way of life is right, and they think that their weapons will defend off any attack, no matter where it comes from. And they showed us in the movies and everything. It's like they never fail. But in the day of Jehovah's destruction, none of those things will work for them. So it's like, even it says that their tongues will be silenced. So they're bragging on their weapons. All that is going to be just nothing. It won't save them.
Okay, thank you. So that point there will prove to be no precious light is what? Brother Hayworth, please.
Light in the Bible can sometimes mean approval, especially from Jehovah. So these ones that fight against Jehovah are not going to have any light and divine favor or approval on their side.
Thank you. Verse 7, we're going to have a reader for verse 7. Sister Parker, please. Paul Parker. Let's follow along.
And it must become one day that is known as belonging to Jehovah. It will not be day, neither will it be night. And it must occur that at evening time it will become light.
Okay, thank you. The day belongs to Jehovah. In what way? Brother Amy, please.
the day will belong to him due to the fact that no human whatsoever will have anything to do with this world being brought to an end as evil. It'll be only Jehovah bringing an end to this wickedness.
Okay, very good. Thank you. And, let's see, verse 12. We'd like to read verse 12 for us, please. Sister Cullett, please. Holly.
And this is what will prove to be the scourge with which Jehovah will scourge all the people that will actually do military service against Jerusalem. There will be a rotting away of one's flesh, while one is standing upon one's feet, and one's very eyes will rot away in their sockets, and one's very tongue will rot away in one's mouth.
Hey, thank you. Very good. And what's the explanation for that Jehovah's organization gives? Brother Bonanno?
Whether that's going to be literal or figurative, he certainly can do that, and whichever way he chooses at that time to deal with them, we're going to see how.
Okay, thank you. And Brother Rayner, please.
Also points out that it's going to silence their threats. Their threats will be no more.
Yes, and just like a blind person, you can only strike out only blindly. Defiant speech is silent. And then finally in verse 15 it talks about the horse, the mules, the camels, so forth. What was the explanation for that? And that the nation's using those? Brother Tufts, please.
That represents their things that they use in the fighting of other nations. And of course, in this case here, have a perfect example of this. We saw the stealth fighter 10 years ago out in service. A simple dust storm makes that unusable. So that's the kind of confidence that we can have and not worry about how Jehovah's going to put an end to everything that they use in the Battle of Armageddon against them.
Okay, thank you. So when this happens, Satan's forces are going to be massive on one side. Jehovah's on the other. According to Jeremiah, what's the outcome? Jeremiah, Sister Christensen in the library, please.
Well, Jeremiah says that the slain by Jehovah will certainly come to be in that day from one end of the earth clear to the other end. So all those that are opposing Jehovah will be done away with.
Yep.